Hey guys, in this video I've gathered many GCSE Physics extended writing questions from AQA past papers for your revision. These questions usually have between 4 to 10 marks and require organized writing skills. I hope you find it helpful and good luck with your exam.
The first question is asking you to describe the difference between the solid and gas states in terms of the arrangement and movement of their particles. 4 marks, 2 for gas, 2 for solid. For solid, particles vibrate about fixed positions, that's their movement, and they're closely packed. Gas, particles move randomly, or move faster or random or freely, and they're far apart. What is meant by specific latent heat of vaporization? 2 marks. If you didn't remember how to define the specific latent heat, you can go to your datasheet, find the formula for specific latent heat, and that would help you to define it. So energy requires to change the state of 1 kilogram of a substance from liquid to gas, because that's for vaporization. Total 6 marks. Another 4 marks makes this question have a 10 marks. You have been given a graph, temperature, time, and is asking you to explain what is happening to the substance in section AB and BC. 2 marks for each section. You need to explain what is happening at the beginning, towards that section, or sometimes what is happening at the end. For AB, changing states from solid to liquid. Remember, the temperature is not changing, therefore the states of matter is changing at a steady temperature. BC, the temperature of liquid rises until it reaches boiling point. 4 marks. Question 2. You have been given a graph, velocity time, of a parachutist. It's asking you to, using the idea of forces, it's very important, forces, explain why parachutist reaches a terminal velocity and why opening the parachute reduces the terminal velocity. 6 marks. So it has 2 parts. First, before opening the parachute, and the second, after opening the parachute. Look at the diagram on the right. The forces you need to talk about is the weight, or the force of gravity, air resistance, upwards or drag force, and the relation between these 2 forces, which is the resultant force. So the examples of the physics points you can mention are these bullet points. First, before opening the parachute. Before leaving the plane, the only force acting is weight. As the parachute falls, air resistance acts upwards, or having drag force, but weight is greater than air resistance, or resultant force are downwards. So you can see we mentioned both forces and the relationship between them, which is the resultant force. As the velocity increases, so does air resistance. It gets to the point that these 2 forces are equal to each other, therefore the parachutist has reached its terminal velocity. So air resistance equals to the weight. That's terminal velocity. Second part, opening parachute increases surface area, means the drag force is increasing. Air resistance is greater than weight. Resultant force acts upwards. It will make the parachutist to decelerate or slow down. The lower velocity means a reduced air resistance until both forces are equal and the parachutist has reached its second or its terminal velocity. Question 3 is about circuit breakers. You are given a diagram here and says describe in as much detail as you can how this circuit breaker works. 6 marks. Remember, any circuit breaker, any fuse, they are to protect your device from getting damaged due to the high current. So when you start answering this question, you definitely need to mention the high current. So high current flows, electromagnet is stronger. So here we have electromagnet. Because of the high current becomes stronger, and it would attract this iron bolt because of magnetic metal. So the iron bolt is pulled out. When it's pulled out, this plastic plunger can jump up due to having the spring here. When it jumps up, it would open the switch. Open the switch means a cut in a circuit and no current will flow anymore. And to reset that, all you have to do is to push this back down. And that's one of the advantages of circuit breaker to fuses, because fuses need to be changed, replaced, but circuit breaker just need to be pushed back in. State and explain the advantages and disadvantages of using nuclear power stations to produce electricity. So 2 marks for advantages, 2 marks for disadvantages. So you can talk about, as advantages, you can talk about cheap fuel, good availability, saving fossil fuels, low running cost, reliable, more energy per kilogram, less fuel needed, no greenhouse gases emitted, no sulfur dioxide causing acid rain. So it's good for in terms of the air pollution. Disadvantages can be danger to health of local community, non-renewable, high cost of decommissioning, long half-life of waste materials, need for safe storage of waste, high cost of commissioning, danger involved in transporting fuel or waste. So 2 of each would be enough. Question 5. We have 2 images, one from ultrasound scan of an unborn child, and the next one is X-ray of a broken bone. Describe the features of ultrasound and X-ray and what happens to each type of wave after it has entered the human body. Features of each, and then what happens for each of them, 6 marks. For X-ray, X-rays are electromagnetic waves. They are having a high frequency, very short wavelengths, they have high energy, and they are transverse waves, and X-rays are ionizing radiation. So that's the feature of X-ray waves. Features of ultrasound. Ultrasound has a frequency above 20,000 Hz. Don't forget to mention the word frequency. Ultrasound is above 20,000 Hz. That's the alternative for it. Ultrasound is above or beyond the human upper limit of hearing, and ultrasound is a longitudinal wave. Remember, sound is a longitudinal wave. Now, what will happen after they enter the body? X-rays are absorbed by bone. X-ray travel through or are transmitted by tissues or skins. Ultrasound is partially reflected when it meets a boundary between 2 different media, travel at different speeds through different media. Remember, ultrasound needs to be reflected back for our probe or device to detect it, but X-ray is going straight through, absorbed by the bone, but the tissues can't stop it. Question 6 is about the heat transfer. So we have a metal pan being used to heat water. Energy from the gas flame is transferred through the metal pan by conduction. Explain the process of conduction through metals. 4 marks. Remember, conduction is linked to electrons, free electrons that we have in metals. That's why metals are good conductor of heat and electricity. So starting by mentioning the free electrons. Energy of free electrons increases as they are being heated up. So free electrons move faster, or we can say they move through metal. And when they move, they can transfer the energy that they have gained from the heat to the other parts or other electrons. That's how the whole metal pan will heat up. Question 7. You have been given a text and some information, and it's asking you to discuss the advantages and disadvantages of the plan to build thousands of offshore wind turbines around Britain and the suggested electricity power link between Britain and Iceland. Do not ignore these texts. Make sure you read them. They will help you a lot. They have so many key information that you can use them in your answers. Always read them, don't ignore them. So, offshore wind turbines, advantages. They are renewable, low running cost, energy is free, no pollution, no gas emission, and land is not used up because they are built offshore on the sea. Disadvantages. They are unreliable as wind is not constant always, or is not the same intensity of power all the time. It's a hazard to the birds or bats. Visual pollution, some people don't like the look of them or it ruins the scenery for them. Difficulty of linking turbines to the national grid. Large initial cost is they are expensive to build. Difficult to erect or maintain. You probably have seen people are transported by the helicopter to maintain them. And carbon dioxide emission is in manufacture. So when they are large number of them are built, so building these turbines, huge amount of carbon dioxide is emitted. Advantages for the second part linking to the Iceland. So income for Iceland, using Iceland's available energy resources, accept using Iceland's renewable energy, provide electricity when wind does not blow, provide electricity at times of peak or demand, even out fluctuations in supply. So when it changes the amount is being supplied, it would help a lot. Excess electricity from Britain on the windy days to Iceland and used to pump water up to store energy. Britain less dependence on fossil fuels. So that's the advantage of linking to the Iceland. Disadvantages, again, large initial cost, power loss along a long cable, difficulties in laying or maintaining the cables. That's another disadvantage. Remember, the longer the cables, the higher the resistance, the more energy loss. Question 8. The tables give data about two types of light bulb, which are halogen and light emitting diode or LEDs. Both types of light bulb produce the same amount of light. Evaluate in terms of cost and energy efficiency the use of the two types of light bulb. So these information already given to you in the table. So energy efficiency and cost, and obviously we have the average lifetime in hours too. Just using these, you'll be able to answer this question. For cost, halogens are cheaper to buy. 6 halogen lamps cost the same as 1 LED. So LEDs last longer. Need to buy 18 or more halogen lamps to last the same time as 1 LED. So as you can see, all this information are from a table. You do not need to memorize any of these or know it from before, just based on the table information. Cost more to run a halogen than LEDs. So if you go back to this table, you can see cost of one, obviously halogen cheaper, but the lifetime of LED is much higher. And then we have the energy efficiency, which is LED 32% and the halogen 10%. Do not forget to back up your answer with some evidence. Evidence are from the tables, like when we talk about the numbers, these are very important. LEDs has lower maintenance cost than the halogens. Efficiency, LED works using a smaller current, therefore they waste less energy, and that's why they are more efficient. Again, this value is taken from the table, 22% more energy efficient than the halogen. Because they are more efficient, they produce less heat, and they require smaller input power for same output power. Question 9, heat transfer gains. You have a vacuum flask here and is labeled. It's designed to reduce the rate of energy transfer by heating processes. Describe how the design of a vacuum flask keeps the liquid inside hot. Remember 3 ways of energy transfer or heat transfer. We have conduction, convection, and radiation. You can mention all these 3 and how they are being stopped. And that would be the answer for this question, 6 marks. Let's start. Plastic caps right at the top is a poor conductor, it's plastic, so it stops convection current. The heat cannot lose by convection, that goes up. Also from the body, because a poor conductor cannot leave the flask either. So it reduces or stops the energy transfer by conduction, convection, and evaporation. Then we have the glass container inside. Is a poor conductor, so reduce the energy transfer by conduction. Glass reduces or stop the energy transfer by conduction, same thing. So vacuum here at the wall between these 2 layers. Remember, vacuum again is a very poor conductor, so stop the energy transfer between the walls. Then we have a silvered surface here. Remember, shiny surfaces would reflect the heat or infrared radiation. So silver reflects infrared radiation, are poor emitter of infrared radiation, therefore the energy stays inside the flask and cannot leave. So we mentioned conduction, convection from plastic cap, vacuum, again conduction is stopped, and from a silvered surface inside the radiation is stopped, so therefore the energy of the hot liquid remains inside. Question 10, you have been given a diagram and is how some metals are heated, the resistance of the metal changes, so how the temperature affects their resistance. The question is, describe an investigation a student could do to find how the resistance of a metal sample varies with temperature. The student should use the equipment shown. Include in your answers how the student should use the equipment, the measurements the student should make. So far the measurements you're going to make is your variables. The equipment, the list, you can have a look at this diagram and list them, and how these measurements are used to determine the resistance, basically your dependent variables, how it's being measured, and how to make sure the results all are valid. 6 marks. So here we have ammeter, we have battery, we have a switch, voltmeter, metal sample, wires, water, beaker, Bunsen burner, thermometer. So you can mention all these in your answer. So example of the physics point, so how this works. So reading the voltage and current, read the temperature, apply the heat, and then read the voltage and current at least one other temperature, so you allow the hot water to cool. Determine the R or resistance from the voltage divided by current. Range of temperatures above 50 degrees Celsius. So do it for the higher temperature, not the low temperatures. So as you heat up the water, you can constantly measure the voltage and current in different temperature and find the resistance. You can use the thermometer to read the temperature at regular intervals for your table. Details of attaining 0 degree Celsius or 100 degrees Celsius. and you can even have a graph of R against temperature, resistance against temperature. At least 3 different temperature. That's 4 would help to make your result reliable. Next question, going back to nuclear physics. So you have a nuclear equation present the fission of uranium-235. So you have the chemical symbols barium and krypton. Use the information in the equation to describe the process of nuclear fission. 4 marks. So nuclear fission, go back to the equation show you here. We have a neutron. Remember, when this neutron is fired at the large element, radioactive elements such as uranium. So neutron is added to the nucleus of the uranium and make it even larger and more unstable, therefore it splits to two new elements, and that's called fission when splitting the large element and producing 3 extra neutron plus energy. So here neutrons absorbed by the uranium nucleus. Ignore atom, do not talk about atom, we are talking about the nucleus. Is a nuclear physics, so just talk about nucleus, talk about neutron and proton that we have inside the nucleus. Forms a larger nucleus, is unstable, therefore splits into 2 smaller nuclei, or you can say into, if you don't remember nuclei, you can say barium and krypton, but it's very important this word nuclei, releasing 3 neutrons and energy. In some cases there are 2 neutrons released, but you remember 3, and energy is released. That's fission. Waves may be longitudinal or transverse. Describe the differences between these 2 types of waves. So 3 marks. And then we have radio waves or electromagnetic waves. Describe how radio waves are different from sound waves. So first, longitudinal and transverse. For we need to talk about oscillation or vibration. They're very important, or scientific terms. For transverse waves, wave is perpendicular or right angle to the direction of energy transfer, or the direction that wave travel. So right angle to the direction of energy transfer. For longitudinal, the oscillation or the vibration is parallel to the direction of energy transfer, or the direction that the wave travels. Parallel, longitudinal, transverse, perpendicular, or right angle. But do not forget to mention the oscillation or vibration, otherwise you will lose 1 mark. Now radio waves and sound waves. Radio waves, they are transverse. They travel at the speed of light, have a greater frequencies, and they can travel through vacuum. These 3 are properties or features of the transverse waves, or electromagnetic waves, electromagnetic waves. These 3. So they're all traveling through the vacuum, the speed of light, they all go, and they're transverse. So in this case, they have a greater frequency than the sound wave. Sound wave is, so that's for the sound wave. Sound wave has a lower frequency, is parallel wave. They are much lower speed. They are around 340 meters per second, and they cannot travel through vacuum. They need medium. Sound wave need medium. Describe what happens to a star after the main sequence period for the star to eventually become a black dwarf. So black dwarf therefore is not a big star, otherwise it would turn to the black hole or neutron star. So after the main sequence, any 5 from this list. Star expands to become a red giant. Heavier elements are formed by fusion. Star shrinks to become a white dwarf. After it cools, it turns to the black dwarf because it won't emit any more energy or light anymore. That's why it's a black dwarf, cannot be seen. So expands, red giant, heavy elements formed, star shrinks, white dwarf, start cooling, and then stops emitting the energy. Question 14. We have a graph, velocity time graph. We have a diagram, someone riding a bicycle, two forces acting on them. The questions now here is, describe how and explain in terms of the forces A and B why the velocity of the cyclist changes between X and Y. You can see it's a curve, and it's changing as well, so Y. And then between the points Y and Z mark on the graph. So we need to interpret these two parts of the graph, X and Y, and then Y and Z. Y and Z, you can see, is gone flat towards the end. So we need to explain that. Okay, first, X to Y. At X, force A is greater. That's why it can go faster, accelerates. A greater than B. A is a motive force here, B here air resistance or drag force. As the cyclist moves towards Y, force B increases. We know we go faster, the air resistance becomes greater. Cyclists continue to accelerate, but a smaller value. So you can see it's not as steep as beginning. So it's less acceleration. Now from Y to Z, force B or air resistance here increases. Acceleration decreases, force B become equal to A, the resultant force now here is 0, they are equal. Therefore the velocity won't change anymore. So here velocity is a constant, fixed number. It's gone flat. So the cyclist has reached its terminal velocity. Next question. Describe how electricity is generated in a hydroelectric power station. Include the useful energy transfers taking place. So we're talking about the hydroelectric power stations and how they work. 4 marks. So water moves from a higher level to a lower level. Remember, hydroelectric power stations are basically dam. So when the dam is built in front of the river and they store the water behind it to gain the gravitational potential energy. So when the water from the above is released, the GP is turned into kinetic energy, will rotate a turbine to turn a generator, and that kinetic energy is then transferred to electrical energy. 4 marks. It's very important to talk about the energy transfers. GPE to kinetic, kinetic to electrical. You do not need to talk about the waste energies such as heat, sound, because it says useful. So the UK produces most of its electricity from fossil fuels. Many people in the UK have their televisions in standby mode when not in use, instead of switching them off. It is better for the environment if people switch off the televisions instead of leaving them in standby mode. Explain why. 3 marks. TV in standby mode uses electricity, even though it's a small amount, but it still will use electricity. Generating electricity produces carbon dioxide or even other harmful gases such as sulfur dioxide. And carbon dioxide contributes to global warming. These are 3 reasons why we should completely switch off our TV or other devices when they are not in use. Obviously, don't switch off your fridge freezer because it's always need to be on, constantly working. But other things such as electric oven, TV, laptops, these kind of. Question 16. Okay, so we have some properties of solid and gases here, and you need to talk about the spacing between the particles, the movement of individual particles, the forces between the particles. We had a similar question to this right at the beginning, the first question. 6 marks. So this time you have been given some information, but you are asked to explain different things. So solids, particle close together, no room for particles to move closer, so it's very hard to compress them, or we better say we cannot compress solids. Vibrates about fixed points, strong forces of attraction. The forces become repulsive if the particles get closer. Particles strongly held together, they're not free to move around. The shape is fixed. For gases, particles far apart. Don't forget, mention the word particles when you talk about the states of matter. They're very important. Space between particles, so you can easily compress them. They move randomly and freely. The forces of attraction is negligible, or we can say there's no force of attraction. They are spread out in all directions to fill the container. They do not have a fixed shape. Question 17. A local council wants to keep a particular section of a road clear of ice in winter. Describe the advantages and disadvantages of keeping the road clear of ice using energy storage, salt, or undersoil electrical heating. There are 3 different possible ways. Let's see which one is the best. For energy storage, advantages: no fuel costs, no environmental effect. Disadvantages: expensive to set up and maintain, need to dig deep on the road, dependent on summer weather, digging up earth and distributing habitats. So it's lots of maintenance to make it or build it, and it can store the energy during the summer when it's hotter weather. That's why it says dependent on summer weather. So if we don't have a hot summer, we won't be able to store the energy to use it during the winter. Obviously, it doesn't have any fuel. The heat from the summer is used. Salt. Salt spreading, easily available and cheap. There are advantages. Disadvantages: can damage trees, plants, drinking water, cars, and need to be cleaned away. After it's used, after they melt the ice, they need to be washed away or cleaned away. Otherwise, they remain on the road, and that's when they can damage trees, plants, water, and cars. Next one, undersoil electrical. Undersoil heating. Advantages is not depending on the weather, can be switched on and off when is needed. Disadvantages is costly and bad for environment. Of course, using electricity costs a lot. Bad for environment because generating electricity, especially from non-renewable resources, it would cause pollution. Question 18. The figure below shows a fridge with a freezer compartment. The air inside the fridge forms a convection current when the fridge door is closed. Explain why. And then the second part, the new fridges are more efficient than fridges made 20 years ago. Give 1 advantages and 1 disadvantages of replacing an old fridge with a new fridge, and ignore the cost of buying a new fridge. So first talking about the convection, how this works in the fridge freezer. So remember, the compartment of freezer was in the top. So air near freezer compartment is cooled or loses energy, and we know the cool air is more dense particles are closer together than the warm air. Therefore, it would sink and air falls. Air at the bottom is displaced by the cold coming from the top and moves upwards. So you are explaining the convection current in the fridge here by saying the hot air rises, cold air from the top sinks because it's more dense, and this continues called convection current. Now replacing, what are the advantages? Reduces emission into atmosphere, lower input power or use less energy. It costs less to run. So remember, we're not talking about buying, it's just running because more efficient, less electricity. Disadvantages. Landfill, of course, you are producing rubbish that has to go somewhere being disposed. So landfill, energy waste in production, and cost or difficulty of disposal, and transport cost, all these costs. But I think overall is always better to replace with something more efficient. Question 19. Describe in as much detail as you can the life history of a star like our Sun. Sun, starting from beginning, formed from dust, gases, pulled together by gravity, massive, so every large gravitational forces pulling inwards, hydrogen turning to helium, fusion taking place. Remember, fusion is the two elements that they're not massive elements, they are very light elements, but anyway, that's for physics only students. High temperature creates high pressure, pushing outwards. Long period when forces are balanced. Remember, the main sequence of a star is when these two forces are equal. So gravitational force and the high pressure due to the fusion pushing outwards, these two, when they are equal to each other, that's the main sequence of the star. Then after the main sequence expands, turn to red giant and contracts, become denser, turn into white dwarf, and after it will turn to black dwarf. So 6 marks. You make sure you have them in order. Even if you don't mention all these bullet points, as long as they are your steps are in order, you get 6 marks. Explain in as much details as you can the scientific evidence for the Big Bang theory of the origin of the universe. I think this question is just for the physics only. I forgot to label this. So the Big Bang theory. There are reasons for them. Is we have observed the galaxies that they are redshifted. More distant galaxies shows bigger redshift. Galaxies moving away or universe expanding, but more distant galaxies moving away faster. So all universe once in one place. If we reverse the time, we go back to the singularity or the Big Bang. So redshift, expansion of the universe. For each of them mentioned, the distant galaxies have bigger redshift and moving away faster. Stars form from gas and dust. Describe in as much detail as you can. Now here we talk about the black hole. What forces allow a stable star to exist, and how the star may eventually form a black hole. Remember, we're talking about the stars bigger than our sun. So gravity pulling matters together, high temperatures that create expansion forces due to the nuclear fusion. These forces balance, star expands greatly. Since expansion is greater than gravity, forms a red giant, super red giant, better to say here, if they are going to form a black hole. So collapses inwards and explodes outwards, called a supernova. Neutron stars may form, but if they are bigger, leaves a small, dense object, which is a black hole. So remember, from this point, the red giant, that's the difference between the big stars and the smaller stars. A red giant for the smaller ones, super red giant for the bigger, and the rest would be different for both of them. Next question, the sun is at a stable stage of its life. Explain in terms of the forces acting on the sun, what this means. So we did talk about this earlier, about the main sequence in terms of forces. The balancing force is very important. You talk about gravity inwards and the force due to temperature or heat or radiation pressure or energy of the nuclear reaction outwards. These two should be balanced to each other. So you mention two forces and mentioning they are balanced together, it gives you 3 marks. Part B, describe and explain the changes that could take place after that main sequence. So the hydrogen fuel is used up. The star will expand and become a red giant. It will contract under gravity, become a white dwarf. It may explode and become a supernova if it's a bigger star, throwing dust and gas into space, leaving a dense neutron star or black hole. Again, make sure you write them in order to give you 6 marks. So I didn't write much here because we had a similar question. Next question, describe in as much detail as you can how the energy stored in coal is transferred into electrical energy in a power station. So from chemical energy to electrical energy in power station. So coal has chemical energy when burns or heat energy produced, used to boil water, making steam. Steam has a kinetic energy used to turn the turbines. That kinetic energy turning generator then means the kinetic energy is transferred to electrical energy. Most power stations work like that, especially the one that burning fuels. The distance time graph presents the motion of a car during a race. Distance, time, and that's for the car. So part A, describe the motion of the car between A and point D, A to D. So we have 1, 2, 3 different sections, and we need to describe this. You do not need any calculation, it's just explaining them, describing them, sorry. And so calculate, and after the part B, it says calculate the gradients of the graph between point B and point C. I know this is not extended writing, then it's part B. It's about calculation, but I found it useful for you to understand because it usually comes with these extended writing questions. Okay, first, A to B. Constant speed is not a curve, it's a linear, straight line here. So the distance time is changing accordingly. Therefore, here we have a constant speed. B to C, the higher speed. So speed increasing because the line here is steeper. And you can see B to C actually is the fastest part because it's the steepest line compared to the others. And then C to D goes back to original. It has the same gradient or the same, as you can see exactly, the steepness is same as A to B. So the same speed. So 3 marks by just talking about the speed of these 3 points. The gradients. The gradients, okay, the answer is 62.5. You can try yourself. For B and C, between B to C, the steepest part. Remember, for gradient, it change in the y-axis over a change in a x-axis. So change from 100 gone to 350, I guess. So the difference is 250. Remember, from 100 to 350, not from 0, because B to C. And the x-axis, the change here is 3 to 7, so the difference is 4. So 350 divided by 4, 62.5, if I read this correctly. Make sure you read these values correctly. Question 25. In the early part of the 20th century, scientists used the plum pudding model, which is here. Following work by Rutherford and Marsden, a new model of the atom called the nuclear model, this one. So now describe the differences between the two models of atom. So remember here, pay attention to these images or diagrams. They give you lots of information. We talk about electrons here, positive charge, the whole thing. So nucleus at the center, electrons orbiting. So you can use this information to gain 4 marks. Nuclear model, this one. Mass is concentrated at the center. Yep, it is correct. Nucleus here, it has the mass. Plum pudding model, mass is evenly distributed. Yes, everywhere. Nuclear model, positive charge occupies only a small part of the atom, right at the center. Plum pudding, positive charges are spread throughout the atom. Nuclear model, electrons orbiting at some distance from the center, but in plum pudding, electrons embedded in the mass of positive charge. So you can't say they are edge of the plum pudding. No, they are embedded everywhere, spread all around where the positive charge is. Plum pudding model is a solid mass, the whole thing, unlike the nuclear model. So as you can see, by looking at this diagram and what we have been given, we can easily get these 4 marks. Next question is about according to kinetic theory, all matter is made up of small particles. The particles are constantly moving, and we have it in this diagram. We have the this is solid, obviously. They are closely packed to each other, regular shape. 1 kilogram of a gas has a much larger volume than 1 kilogram of solid. Use kinetic theory to explain why. Kinetic theory is linked to these particles. So let's see what are the differences. So there are a strong force of attraction between the particles in solid. That's why they are very close to each other. The particles are closed together. Or we can say the particles in fixed pattern or position. Remember, these are all for solid. But in gas, the forces between the particles are negligible. We can say there is a 0 force between them, or there's no force between them. So the particles spread out to fill the container. So don't panic when they say kinetic theory. It's all about the particles, the arrangement and the movement of the particle, which is very similar to the question 1. Question, okay, part B. Now we have the particles in liquid, but this liquid is evaporating. So how can you tell that the liquid is evaporating? That's 1 mark. And then the temperature of the liquid in the container decreases as the liquid evaporates. Use kinetic theory to explain why. So particles are leaving. That shows that evaporation is taking place. Part II, second part. The molecules or atoms for particle throughout. Okay, so accept these scientific terms. Particles with most energy leave the surface of this liquid. That means the average energy of the liquid is dropping. Therefore, when you have less energy, the liquid would be cooler or have a lower temperature. I'll go back again to show it to you. So first, these particles are leaving, means is evaporation happening. So when the high energy, always the one in the top surface have a higher energy. When they leave behind the lower energy particles. Therefore, the average energy of the whole liquid is lowered, is less, means the liquid is cooler now. Okay, from this question, only the students who are taking the physics only or they're doing the triple science need to continue. If you are doing the combined science, you can stop now because these questions are not relevant to you. So there are two types of traditional transformers, step up and step down. Describe the similarities and differences between these two types of transformers. You should include details of construction, including materials used, and the effect the transformer has on the input potential difference or input voltage. You should not draw a diagram, so that won't help you. Don't waste your time. Okay, so construction or the materials is used. We have a core. Core is made from magnetic material, iron. Two coils. The coils are made from an electrical conductors, copper. The coils are covered in plastic or insulation. The coils are on opposite side usually. A step-up transformer has more turns on secondary coil than its primary, while step-down has fewer turns on secondary coil than its primary. And the effect on input PD, step up, the output PD is greater, it would increase the voltage. A step down would drop the voltage, so the output PD is lower. The skateboard moves backward as the skateboarder jumps forward. Explain using the idea of momentum why the skateboard moves backwards. So remember, 3 marks is good to mention the conservation of momentum here in this question. So momentum before equals to momentum after. That's the conservation of momentum. Always is conserved. On this question you get in GCSE. Before jumping, momentum of a skateboard and a skateboarder is 0. But after, skateboarder has momentum forward, so a skateboard must have equal momentum backwards. So first, just standing on a skateboard, none of them are moving. If they are not moving, means there is no momentum. But as the skateboarder jumps, starts moving, and it has obviously mass times its velocity would give some momentum. But remember, the momentum should be equal to the previous before jumping, means it should be 0. So we need the skateboard itself to move in opposite direction. So it would give us the, remember that's the vector quantity, it would give us a negative value and equal to the skateboarder's momentum. So obviously a skateboard gonna move faster because it has a less mass. So before and after both are equal, therefore and is 0. This question is about moment. So Susan has a case with wheels. When she packs his case, she puts the heaviest items at the end where the wheels are. This means that the heaviest items are less likely to crush the other content, and it helps her to find things when she opens the case. Explain another advantage of packing her case in this way. Now we talk about the physics of moment and why it is better to keep the heavier item the closer to the wheels. So I have a diagram for you here to explain the moment. As you can see, the center of a mass of a bag and its all contents, if it's higher, it would have a greater moment and more force would be on the hand. You need more upward force to lift the suitcase. But if we lower the center of the mass by placing the heavier stuffs closer to the wheel, the moment here, the distance from the pivot would decrease. Therefore, less moment means less upward force needed to hold or carry this back. So any 3 connected points from all these: lower center of mass, more stable, less likely to fall over. The turning effect of moment is less, so it's easier to carry. So the pull on her arm is less. Stability, lower moment, less likely to fall over, and because of the lower center of mass. Question 30, transformers again. Why is the core made of iron? 1 mark, and explain how a transformer works. So we know it's made out of iron because it's a magnetic metal. It has to become magnetized, and obviously it needs to easily lose it, so it's never going to be a permanent magnet. That's why it's iron. How it works, any 4 from all these bullet points. So insulation prevents electricity or current flowing through the iron. Alternating current or AC in the primary coil produces a changing magnetic field in the iron core, and that field in the secondary coil, we have a magnetic field, induces or generates or produces an alternating potential differences. This alternating therefore would have an alternating current or AC in the secondary coil. Here, so the whole thing insulated, the wires here, the AC would change the magnetic field, therefore here would change the PD, and you would have another alternating current, but this one, the numbers of the coil, as you can see, is less, therefore this one is a step down transformer. You would have a lower voltage on this side. Question 31. Describe the advantages and disadvantages of having laser surgery to correct visual defects, wearing glasses to correct visual effects. Remember guys, you need to read this information. I just skipped them, but you need to read them to be able to answer them, and has 6 marks. A lot of information in these texts to help you with the answers, even if you didn't know anything about laser surgery or glasses. So laser surgeries, as you can see, the appearance, well, some people prefer not to wear glasses, which is help them with the appearance, is a permanent effect, and no glasses which need changing. Disadvantages, risk associated with surgery. Remember, any surgery has its own risk. Large cost, much greater cost than buying glasses. Not able to drive, etc. straight away, so some people need to be taken home after the surgery, so they can't drive themselves, and they still might need glasses for reading as they grow older. For aging, because of aging, they need to wear glasses for reading. Wearing glasses advantages: able to function straight away. Any problems, easy to sort out. So if you have any problem with that, you can easily go to optician and fix that, but laser eye surgery is not that easy. Disadvantages: easily broken, easily lost. I can confirm that. Need changing, and especially if your eyesight changes, you need to change your glasses. Overall cost might be greater if several changes in vision. If you have to constantly change your glasses, therefore that means it costs you a lot. Might eventually need 2 pairs of glasses. Remember, one for long distance, one for short distance, especially if you're getting old. Okay, so the questions are finished here. I have some tips for you here when you see the exam papers starting. First of all, do not panic at all. It won't help you. Read the questions carefully. You have seen how much information are given in the questions. Organize the information. Some students prefer to underline the key information in the question. Some prefer to highlight it. Any way that helps you to organize them, please do it. Sometimes you can start by writing the information separately, and instead of going back and reading the whole question again. Sketch the scene. Sometimes you need to draw a free body diagram, or draw forces, or draw a circuit to make the scenario more imaginable for yourself and understandable. Verify the units. Look the units if they are standard units, if they need to be converted or not. Gram to kilogram, centimeter, meter. So always check your units, consider your formulas. Data sheet for you is a great help. Pick the right formula from a data sheet. If you've been given the force and mass, you're asked to find the acceleration, you know the F equals ma, not that's changing velocity over time. That's not relevant. So pick the right formula, solve it, verify your result, make sure your result makes sense. We can't have a speed of light over 300,000 kilometers per second, so make sure your results make sense. Or having like 200,000 volts for the battery, obviously it's not correct, so you have done some mistake in solving them. So verify your result and don't forget to write the unit if is asked. Sometimes the unit is given to you, but sometimes you have to write the unit, and that's the extra mark. And the last but not the least, practice, practice, practice. So I know it's not long left, but good luck to all of you.